Hello and welcome to Sunday Politics. The Windsor Framework's red and green lanes have been in operation for almost a month now, so what impact will strike action by port staff have on east-west trade? We'll hear from a leading union representative. We'll also have more of our interview with Taoiseach and Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin. Do you think there'll be a border poll in your lifetime?
How long do you think I'm going to live?
Well, I don't know.
No, this is
you tell me.
It is a classic soundbite, like the how long I live business, or will it be in my lifetime? I heard that in the 1970s.
And we'll ask our panel of commentators for their thoughts on what he had to say. From midnight tonight, workers in Northern Ireland's ports will kick off 5 days of strike action by walking out, and they'll be joined by hundreds of government-employed vets here. The industrial action could cause significant disruption at our ports and in the food processing sector. With me now to talk through the possible implications of the action is Carmel Gates, General Secretary of the Public Sector Union. NIPSA, welcome to you and thanks very much for joining us in the programme. Just explain to us, if you would, first of all, why your members have decided to go on strike.
OK, it's in furtherance of a pay dispute that has been ongoing for a year. So we had a pay award imposed upon us of £552 for 22-23. That equates to less than 1%, while we've seen colleagues in other areas get significantly more. So the pay award to us came at the end of a budget set by the Secretary of State, where he stripped departments of money, and which we believe was an economic sanction that he has imposed for political reasons. So public servants have had a £552 pay increase, and that is on top mark of pay cuts year on year. So over the last 10 years, civil servants have probably lost in real terms between 25 and 30% of their actual wage. But
you will know very well that it's hard to get anybody to take responsibility for actually increasing pay in the public sector at the moment, and also the economics of this place are such that the money isn't there anyway, the government says.
Well, it could be there. I mean, this is money. My colleagues across the water, civil servants, public sector workers across the water, received additional money, as you'll know, from Treasury during the year, and that was as a compensation to the fact that inflation hit double digits. What happened here was that the Secretary of State determined that the debt, the so-called debt that we had run up, meant that we couldn't get that additional barn of consequentials until our debt was repaid. So public servants here, workers here and public services have been punished by economic sanctions that the Secretary of State has imposed for political reasons. So I know he'll deny it, but we know that what he's doing is trying to put pressure on the DUP to go back into the Assembly, and he's holding this as an economic threat over our head.
But that's obviously not how he sees it. I just wonder to what extent you have had useful, constructive conversations with Chris Heaton-Harris or any of those working for him in the NIO.
I would love to say we had. I've written to him now 4 occasions seeking a meeting. I've had 2 further requests made through his permanent secretary in the NIO for a meeting, even as late as last week. We're ready to talk if the Secretary of State would allow civil servants the money to sit down and discuss an end to the dispute. Next week wouldn't be happening. So we're ready to talk, but the money hasn't been made available.
I presume you've made the point to him, have you, that your members are absolutely critical in keeping east-west trade moving. He says that's very important. He's trying to demonstrate that the Windsor framework is working. Are you surprised that he hasn't made a special effort to try to sort this issue out before it's come to the point it's come to?
Yeah, it's incomprehensible, in all honesty, because our members are vital to the whole of the food safety. It's our members across Veterinary Service Animal Health Group, so it's meat inspectors, it's portal inspectors, it's vets, who are essential to the food chain and essential to ensuring the trade flows.
So how do you justify this strike action if it means, as you're saying yourself, it could mean supermarket food supply lines will be adversely affected? Ordinary people looking for their ordinary weekly shop could find that the foodstuffs they want to buy aren't available on the shelves, and it will be on your members' heads.
Well, that's what happens when workers withdraw their labour, as they have the right to do. And the department, DIRA, the department, has actually recognised that we have a right to strike. We have tried everything else, Mark. We've been in 2 days of strike action earlier in the year, once for the teachers, once for public service, or the health service workers, because it's all public servants here that are affected, and we're doing this for them. And could I say...
they might not see it that way, of course.
Well, the veterinary services here are close to crisis. There are around 60 vacancies. 5 years ago it was in single figures, and the reason they can't recruit is that civil service salaries are so low that there is a danger that the service will crumble. So our members are taking this action. You know, a week's disruption, yes, but in furtherance and the protection of public services.
OK, but just briefly, and finally, already there's a chink in your armour, is there not? Because you've had to put in place poultry derogations, because if you didn't do that, then potentially, presumably, tens of thousands of chickens would perhaps have to be slaughtered and would be wasted. That's
not a chink in our armour. I think that's positive. It shows how willing veterinary service are. I mean, these are professionals who are in the profession because they care about animal welfare. So they are. We've put this derogation in place to allow that to continue. But there will be significant disruption across red meat and across ports.
All right, we need to leave it there. Carmel Gates, thanks very much indeed for coming in to join us. We'll keep an eye on that action over the week coming, of course. Ben Lowry, just very quickly, this is another example, yet another example of the pressures local services are under.
That's right, and there are big problems with local services, and we know that in health, and we know that in a number of sectors. I do think it's important to put another side to strikes, and the reason that I think it's important to do this is that it's just not being put. I mean, even in the UK, a Conservative government hasn't really properly made the counter-argument to strikes, and certainly not in Northern Ireland. In fact, I was on a programme before where there were 2 union officials and I was the only person making the other side to the argument. And I think it's important to make, and the key point I'd make is this, because we're not going to spend the whole programme on it. There's an awful lot of money pumped into Northern Ireland from London, many, many billions of pounds. And when Stormont was running, which it has been for more often than not since 1998, 25 years, it simply hasn't taken difficult decisions. Okay. And there's some very, very big inefficiencies. For example, ignoring what experts have said for health. And so the problems for this are very significantly down to our local politicians and people not hearing the other side, why there is actually a lot of money spent in Northern Ireland and it's not divided wisely.
OK, Carmel Gates isn't persuaded by that argument. She's shaking her head. Something we'll come back to, no doubt, in the weeks and months ahead. Need to leave it there for now, but we'll hear more from you later, of course. Ben, thank you very much indeed for now. On Thursday, we brought you part 1 of our interview with the Taoiseach Micheál Martin. Today, we're bringing you the second instalment in which we discuss 2 key issues of the moment: the potential for constitutional change and relationships on this island. Earlier this week, the Northern Ireland Minister Steve Baker said a border poll should require a super majority. And I wonder, do you think, is he right? And if he is, how would that work?
No, he's not right. The Good Friday Agreement is very clear. And the vast majority of the people on this island voted for the Good Friday Agreement. It was an incredible endorsement by the people who wanted peace. And part of that then was that, enshrined in the Good Friday Agreement, is that in the future, at the determination of the Secretary of State, that if a majority wanted to create a new constitutional state or wanted to vote for unity or whatever, that was allowed for in the agreement.
But could you deliver that? Could you deliver such huge constitutional change based on a 51% vote? Because, you know, the former SDLP Deputy First Minister Seamus Mallon, in his later years, made the case for a supermajority.
Yeah, but the agreement is the agreement and it's there. And I think ministers need to be careful, in my view, in sort of talking in terms of supermajorities or needs. You can't rewrite agreements on the hoof. These are very fundamental constitutional agreements that were endorsed by the people of the island. It's a very important point. You can't just casually dismiss that. You can't say, well, you need 60% for this or 70% for that. Referendums are referendums. But of course, you had a very strong, you had your, as a 70% plus, if I recall, for the referendum on the Good Friday Agreement. And I think, but what's important is that we focus on the evolving situation, the restoration of the executive and the assembly. Like what I'm doing on Shared Island, and today we had a very good session this morning on how do we accommodate shared identities on the island of Ireland. identity is evolving. It's never a fixed thing. We need to start focusing on practical things, working together. There's a huge investment programme, the largest in the history of the Irish government in terms of investment in Northern Ireland, about $1 billion for Ulster Canal, which will benefit everybody. Scientific research between universities on the island to sort issues out in terms of cancer diagnosis, all which benefits people. So why do we always end up getting into arguments about supermajorities and everything else, when really the people, I think, want us to do practical things that benefit their daily lives, in education, in health. It's time for a positive, proactive, pragmatic approach to understanding how we share this space together. That's what's required, and I feel people go down endless cul-de-sacs, creating political campaigns that are more about soundbite than substance. I've been around a significant degree of time in this. I was in the government when the Good Friday Agreement was passed. I was a young Minister for Education at the time, and I lived through the 70s and the 80s, and all the murder and all the mayhem. I've had it with soundbites, I've had it with slogans. I don't need them. I think we need to just really focus on how do we evolve in a way that unites people on a people-to-people basis, or maybe the word reconcile. We didn't really fulfill the potential of the Good Friday Agreement on reconciliation, full reconciliation between traditions and communities. We've the hard practical work of that to do yet.
One last question on the issue of constitutional change, and I'm not looking for a soundbite, but I'm interested to hear what your position is, because other people involved in government are talking about it. Chris Heaton-Harris says he won't see a united Ireland in his lifetime. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says a border poll won't happen in his lifetime. He's 60, you're 63. Do you think there'll be a border poll in your lifetime?
Now, how long do you think I'm going to live?
Well, I don't know.
No, this is
you tell me.
It is a classic soundbite, like the how long I live business, or will it be in my lifetime? I heard that in the 1970s. I heard Taoiseach being asked.
Depends
that.
if you're an optimist or not.
Well, I know, but no. But the point I'm trying to make is we do really need to move off that. And what do we mean by unity? Like I pose that as I'm a Republican, and I'm of the Wolfe Tone tradition, which basically means uniting. In his day, Protestant, Catholic and dissenter. In the modern era, by the way, you can add a few more to that. Irish, British, people now define themselves as Northern Ireland. You have 20% of the population in the Republic not born on the island of Ireland, who are now resident citizens and so on like that. So the point I'm trying to make to you is it's about reconciliation and unifying people. There will be new political configurations, of that I've no doubt. I can't be precise in how all of that evolves. But the fundamental point is nothing matters unless we reconcile. And I would say this about what Seamus Mallon wrote and spoke when he launched his book. We do need to learn how to live together, how to share this space that we all call home.
I just want to make one final point on this issue. So you are saying here, as a Republican in the tradition of Wolfe Tone, you do not think it is helpful for you to say, for example, that you believe there would be a border poll or a united Ireland in your lifetime? And do you think those individuals who are campaigning for that, who want that conversation to happen?
Well, I didn't say it wouldn't be helpful. That's not the reason I'm not saying it. I just think.
But are they mistaken? The people who are calling for that sooner rather than later, is that a mistake?
The border poll was a campaign approach, which, depending on the politics of the time, the tempo was increased or the tempo was reduced. I was always struck by the last number of elections we had that Sinn Féin actually dialed down border polls during the elections in Northern Ireland, during the Assembly election and during local elections, because they know it didn't travel that well. But once the elections are over, it goes back up the poll again. I just think the border poll was wrong after Brexit. It was moved too quickly, ill thought out, ill informed. We saw what happened with Brexit, and I don't think it was a properly thought out concept. And I think what we need to do is far more hard work in terms of the reconciliation piece. That's what I meant by Wolfe Tone. I mean, Wolfe Tone and the Fianna Fáil party is a Republican party in the tradition of Wolfe Tone, always has been, about unity and reconciliation of people. And so I have no issue with that, and I want to do that. But we have to do it with people. We can't, and that's the key.
Well, let's pick up on what Micheál Martin said in that interview with the commentator and former Sinn Féin election candidate Chris Donnelly, the editor of the newsletter Ben Lowry, and our Dublin reporter Aoife Moore. Welcome to all of you. Aoife, first of all, just talk us through how high up the agenda a border poll is, in your view, in Dublin.
It's definitely a conversation that's happening on the ground. It's something anecdotally you hear people talking about. People often make jokes and say, well, we won't need to worry about that when we have a united Ireland. Within politics, it's not as much, definitely not publicly. Of course, Sinn Féin are still, beating that drum about how a border pool would help Ireland north and south. Micheál Martin, it's not a conversation, as we've just seen, it is not a conversation that he wants to be part of. We're at a stage now where Micheál Martin is actually being outflanked in republicanism by Leo Varadkar, who said he believes that he will see a united Ireland, and we can't get Micheál Martin to say the same thing. I think the most interesting thing from that clip in that interview is that he said he didn't like sound bites, but he couldn't really get to the point of his answer. And I think if you watch Micheál Martin and how he operates, he is so deeply uncomfortable, and he is very rarely on point when it comes to these answers, because although he has his own beliefs, the view is very much that he doesn't know how to articulate them. His comfort zone is reaching out the hands to unionists. That's where he sees himself. He picked foreign affairs as his ministry because he wants the North to be his legacy. He was around, as he always says, that he was around at the time of the Good Friday Agreement. But I think he is so concerned with maybe trying to look as Republican as Sinn Féin or copy Mary Lou in some sort of way that he talks around the subject a lot. So absolutely, it is a conversation that's being had on the ground and within businesses. Big companies, multinationals are having these conversations about the possibility of United Ireland now, but within politics, as we see it on the Dáil floor, it's not.
Ben, very interesting, isn't it, just to hear Aoife's assessment of that, and she's living and working in Dublin, and to hear what the Taoiseach has to say. He focuses very much on his shared island unit, and it is about outreach to unionists. And there he is as the leader of the Republican Party, sounding less Republican than Leo Varadkar, who's the leader of Fine Gael.
It's a pretty extraordinary thing, and it does raise the question: is what is the point in these two parties if at one time, the ultra or original, you could say in some respects, Republican Party, and the pro-treaty party that wasn't initially a Republican Party, the latter, the one that you'd expect to be softer and gentler in its approach to Britain, which it was over the better part of a century, is now more outspoken on all islands. So I think that's an interesting thing. So what are you dealing with? You're dealing with a generational difficulty, generation change, and you have people like Bertie Ahern and Micheál Martin, who are very diplomatic in what they say and don't want to rile unionists. And I think Leo Varadkar's at least 10 years younger. Gosh, maybe 20 years younger. I think he's 10 years younger than me, so 20 years younger. And I think this is a big challenge for unionists. The first thing is, if unionists can't have good relations with somebody like Micheál Martin, then they're in trouble. And then the second thing is that the younger generations are much more, in the Republic, are much more outspoken on this.
Yeah. I mean, it is a fascinating situation, Chris, isn't it? I mean, those of us who studied politics 20, 30, 40 years ago, this has all been turned completely on its head.
Fianna Fáil's republicanism over the last half-century has merely been rhetorical. And therefore, what has changed and why Micheál Martin is so uncomfortable is directly associated with the inexorable rise, politically and electorally, of Sinn Féin.
Is that what it's about, in your view?
Of course. We would not have the Shared Island Initiative but for the fact that Sinn Féin are in the ascendant position politically and electorally in the Republic at this moment in time. It's an attempt to try to say, well, I'm doing something and I'm not getting on board with the Sinn Féin position, which is about being more strident in terms of preparing for unity, having campaigns. So do you think Micheál Martin is on the front foot or on the back foot in all of this? Oh, he's most surely on the back foot. And I think that part of the difficulty for Micheál is I think he's running out of time. I think Micheál, in a number of ways, not just on this, on coalition as well, his party is going to move beyond him soon. Micheál's from a previous generation. Some of the stuff we'll maybe come on to talk to, they talked about in the View on Thursday night. Others within Fianna Fáil, certainly of a younger generation, are wanting to park that and say it's in the past, move on. We're going to, more than likely, going to have to align ourselves in a potential future coalition alongside Sinn Féin. That'll be in a post-Micheál Martin environment. He's not going to be comfortable with that. OK. Well, that moves us on very nicely. Let's just pause this conversation for a moment or two, because I do want to have a look back at one particular part of the interview we broadcast on The View on Thursday night, the section on IRA commemorations. Here's a quick reminder of what the Taoiseach had to say about that issue. On September the 24th, you tweeted that you were honoured to attend and deliver the oration today at the centenary of the Renine ambush in Milltown, Molby in Clare. 6 RIC officers were killed by the IRA in that
ambush. So just to be clear, are you saying Mary Lou's IRA are the bad guys, but your IRA are the good guys? Is that it?
Well, I think, again, I don't know, did you read the speech I gave at then?
I've seen the speach.
Yeah.
And I mean,
the speech would be far different to the kind of speech that Sinn Féin
well, that's what
give.
you tweeted.
No, just have Sinn Féin. Yeah, but just let me finish the point. I mean, in all of my speeches in terms of commemoration, and I don't know, have you seen my speech on the civil...
You talked about the sacrifice
have you seen
in that speech.
Have you seen my speech on
the
civil
Yeah, I looked at your speech just before we did this interview.
If you just calm it now, and I'll come back to you. All of my speeches on independence, the War of Independence, which was a legitimate war of independence in Ireland, there is a difference. The 30-year war of Sinn Féin was a war against civilians on a consistent basis. Enniskillen, Bloody Friday. These were bombing urban areas, Warrington, the list goes on and on and on. And my point is, I don't triumphalise violence.
Well, interesting to hear his thoughts on that particular issue. Ben, if it's all about outreach to unionists on the part of Micheál Martin, what do you make about his efforts there, apparently to draw a distinction between different kinds of commemorations?
So I was saying earlier that if unionists can't have a good relationship with Micheál Martin, they're in trouble, because Micheál Martin has always been outspoken about IRA terrorism. And it is a word that I think it's important to use, not least because the Republic of Ireland designated it as terrorism. Now, obviously, a unionist is not going to accept that the War of Independence was necessary. We were talking earlier about Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil. John Bruton wrote a brilliant essay that we actually reproduced on the centenary of the Easter Rising, saying why it shouldn't have happened, why Ireland would have got de facto independence like Canada and Australia. That's all gone. Of course, we're not going to revisit that. We're not going to agree on that. But there is nonetheless a distinction between the War of Independence, even though there are unionists and people in the Republic who think that that shouldn't have happened. There is a clear distinction between that sort of war after the 1918 election result and so on, and the terrorism post-1969. And you know the best illustration of that? The best illustration of that is when Sinn Féin starts contesting elections from the early 1980s, and it gets until the end of the 90s, after the Belfast Agreement, between 1% and 4% of the vote. So the people of the Republic of Ireland wanted nothing to do with a party that defended terrorism.
Aoife, is this, in a nutshell, about whether or not you believe a distinction can be drawn between the killing of an RIC officer 100 years ago or an RUC officer 50 years ago?
Yeah, and to be honest, this is a conversation that is constantly brought up, and I think for the amount of times I believe it is mentioned, I find it quite astonishing that Micheál Martin hasn't really come around to a set point on this. You know, it's what commentators like Joe Braley often say, you know, they were talking about good IRA and bad IRA. I think that's what it comes down to. And as Sinn Féin get more and more popular, and we've seen today in the polls, it's a conversation that people are having, because when you see Fine Gael, when young people especially who did not live through the Troubles see, and they also see the Troubles as history, they do not see any difference from the commemorations that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil go to, and then the commemorations of the hunger strike, because the hunger strike to them is, say, history. So I think it's a conversation that has been going on now, especially with the popularity of Sinn Féin, and I don't think Micheál Martin has come up with a good enough answer that's going to convince those younger voters, and we are seeing that in the polls today.
Chris, is this a generational issue? I mean, you would have seen social media over the weekend, a significant reaction to the conversation that was broadcast on The View on Thursday night, and there are people who say that you cannot criticise Sinn Féin for supporting or being involved in the commemoration of the IRA in the most recent Troubles, while at the same time talking about the discipline and the organisation of the volunteers involved in Renine, about the image of brave volunteers, their unique service and honouring their sacrifices. All lines that I have lifted out from a fairly lengthy speech he gave at that commemoration back in September.
I think particularly as the time has moved on, we've moved away from the Troubles, then people can have that historical analysis of it. But there are layers to this conversation. Part of it is, I think, the historian Colm Dorr noted of the exchange that you had with Micheál Martin, that the IRA killed 4 times as many RIC policemen 100 years ago than RUC members from 1969-98. And of course, in Micheál Martin's hometown, they disappeared significantly more people than the IRA did during the 1969-98 period. But of course, it's much more than that. You see, what this boils down to is, if you believe it's okay to commemorate some good British Army, some good RUC, some good UDR, some good B specials, alongside acknowledging that terrible things were done in those organisations over a lengthy period of time in Ireland, then what people will come down to is, well, you're going to have to accept that other people have an analysis that commemorations can be legitimate for Republicans, in spite of the fact that terrible deeds were committed by those organisations as well.
And Aoife, Micheál Martin, to be absolutely fair to him, was very clear in that interview that he has never, he says, triumphalised the actions of those who were involved in that war 100 years ago.
Yeah, he does. He's very clear on that. But, you know, this is where I think the kind of complications come in for to be able to stand and say, you know, a proud Republican Party, but then again won't say, well, if he thinks he'll see, you know, a united Ireland. And I think this is the message that Fianna Fáil continues to come up against. You know, when you speak to Fianna Fáil TDs at the minute, they will say their real issue is they can't differentiate themselves from Fine Gael. The public can't tell the difference between a Fianna Fáil policy and a Fine Gael policy. And then when you see, you know, these sorts of answers to what are now very pertinent questions when it comes to reconciliation, when it comes to this new Ireland and the shared Ireland, about how we deal with legacy. I think that's what we're seeing more and more. Sorry.
We've got about 30 seconds left. Is it possible to square that circle? Is it possible to get people on the same page, do you think, Ben, at any stage? Because this is incredibly complicated territory.
No, I don't think it's going to be possible. And that's why, personally, I've always thought with legacy you have the most minimal approach.
Can people agree to disagree respectfully?
They can. And
that's the best
from the union's perspective, I'd say the way the Republic's going, if it wants to endorse the IRA, so be it. But the two-state solution becomes all the more important.
Chris?
Yeah, just right. I think that the best we could hope for is that people will agree to disagree respectfully and just acknowledge that, and they'll have commemorations that people will just mark and just say, look, that's from a different tradition to mine.
Well, at least we've aired the debate. Thank you very much indeed for coming in to help us do that today. That's just about all we've got time for this week. You can watch part one of the interview, by the way, with Micheál Martin on the iPlayer. Just search for The View. We're taking a week off for a Halloween break now. We'll see you on the other side of that. For now, though, from everyone on the programme team, thanks for watching. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.